Hello and welcome, this is TV Papua News of April 2014. With bringing you this time, Global Day of Action for Indigenous Papuan Political Prisoners. Indonesian police brutality against peaceful civilians. Ongoing border conflicts between Papua New Guinea and Indonesia. New Free West Papua campaign office in Perth, Australia. But we begin with the Global Day of Action for Indigenous Papuan and Moluccan Political Prisoners.
Global Day of Action for Indigenous Papuan and Moluccan Political Prisoners. On the 2nd of April, demonstrations took place in Port Mumbai, London, Melbourne, Brisbane, Wellington, Auckland, The Hague and Edinburgh for the release of the indigenous Papuan and Moluccan political prisoners in Indonesian prisons.
In the capital of West Papua, Port Mumbai, the demonstrations began peacefully, but were violently dispersed by Indonesian police, who have been said to already provoke the protesters with racist remarks. 2 protesters were arrested and severely abused by the armed police forces, showing exactly the discrimination and violations of the human rights of indigenous Papuans by the Indonesian armed forces. And in London, the demonstration was organized by Free West Papua campaign together with TAPO and Amnesty International. Also, Nixiwaka Yawanava, campaigner for the rights of the Amazon, joined to show his support. As an Amazon Indian, I can understand the Papuans' fight for freedom and justice. The Papuan tribes have suffered racism and violence at the hands of the Indonesian government for over 50 years now. This inhumane action has to stop immediately. Indonesian police brutality against peaceful civilians. According to information gathered by London-based human rights organization TAPO, Alvarez Capisa and Yali Wenda were participating in a peaceful demonstrations at Cendrawasih University on the 2nd of April. The protest was part of the Global Day of Action. The protesters are reported to have been electrocuted and beaten while being transported to the Jayapura police station in a police truck. They have been forced to sign a falsified police investigations report and have been denied medical treatment and access to lawyers. And according to activists of King Mi Papua Gospel Tabernacle Church, Indonesian police abused 2 other indigenous Papuans on the senior high school complex Yapis Nabire, also this month.
When Silawanus Nagapapa tried to stop the brutal actions of members of the mobile police brigade of Nabire, he was attacked and abused. Also, other Papuan got abused when he tried to stand up for tithes of his friends. Both men were arrested but were brought to the hospital after fainting because of blood loss. There has been no investigation conducted into this case, and the victims must bear the cost of their own medical treatments.
Ongoing border conflicts between Papua New Guinea and Indonesia. The tension on the border between Papua New Guinea and Indonesia continues to rise after clashes 10 days ago between Indonesian troops and a fraction of the Free West Papua movement, also known as the OPM. On Saturday 5th of April, about 15 OPM fighters dressed in battle fatigues arrived from the jungle and raised the West Papuan Morning Star, as well as 2 UN flags, and read out a declaration. Several shots have been fired at Indonesian border posts, but nobody got hit. The attack comes after a lull in armed rebel activity in recent years. And 2 days ago, a statement by OPM leader Mathias Wenda declared a revival of the West Papuan struggle. "We are fighting for our identity," said Mr. Wenda. "Soon my people will be gone. We want the global community to recognize what's going on in West Papua."
A colorful parade preceded the signing ceremony this morning. Commander of the Pacific Fleet Admiral Samuel J. Locklear represented the United States. Admiral Locklear arrived in the country to meet political and military leaders and reaffirm the 2 countries' bilateral relationship and strengthen partnership.
Objectives in the Asia Pacific have been for about the last 70 years is to ensure that we have peace and prosperity so that our economies can grow and that our children can have safe environments to raise their families.
To ensure that our people in the region are safe from all forms of aggressions and all forms of activities.
Meanwhile, on the PNG Indonesia border crisis, PNGDF Commander Gilbert Turopo said the troops have everything under control.
And because it happened along the border, PNG citizens have been affected. As a result, we've got our troops along the border maintaining presence to make sure that it doesn't spill over into PNG.
The Admiral was also asked if the US would intervene in this crisis, and this was his response.
We support peaceful resolutions among sovereign countries.
Admiral Locklear added that the agreement signed today does not in any way commit either country to any military action. He said it is solely to facilitate the exchange of logistics support, supplies and services during exercises, training or emergencies. Overall, the agreement is to increase readiness of military partnerships by reducing the initial logistics hurdles such as bureaucratic processes. The US has bilateral agreements as such with over 100 countries worldwide. Bernadette Effie, National MTV News.
On MTV News Special Report tonight, we give you an exclusive look at the PNG-Indonesian border. The construction of a 90 million kina base on the PNG-Indonesian border has been put on hold indefinitely after clashes 10 days ago between Indonesian troops and a faction of the Free Papua Movement, or the OPM. PNG soldiers have been monitoring the border after the fighting. The commander of the Vanimo-based Bravo company, Major Peter Wayaki, has warned OPM elements that the PNGDF will not tolerate the use of PNG soil to launch armed attacks. His statements come after the PNGDF burnt OPM camps on Thursday. In this special report, MTV's Scott Wide looks at the events of the last 2 weeks as well as the different players in this conflict.
At least a day before the disturbance, intelligence obtained by the Papua New Guinea Defence Force prompted an evacuation of government workers as well as contractors working on the facility on the PNG side of the border. On Saturday, the 5th of April, about 15 OPM fighters dressed in battle fatigues arrived from the jungle-covered south and raised the West Papuan Morning Star as well as 2 UN flags. As a political declaration was read out in Bahasa, armed fighters set fire to the nearby Indonesian quarantine facility, tore down the banners and burned the Indonesian flags. Later, they began firing at this Indonesian observation post about 100 meters away. The attack was aimed at disrupting the Indonesian provincial elections and provoking a response from a company of Indonesian soldiers located about 200 meters from the PNG side. Just meters away from the action, Major Peter Wayaki, commander of the Vanimo-based Bravo company, and several soldiers were monitoring what had escalated into a gun battle between the OPM and Indonesian troops.
They fired at the Indonesian observation post and continued to fire from 10:00 hours in the morning up until 3 p.m. We didn't want a spillover from Indonesian territory into the PNG territory, so we evacuated all the civilians that were working in here.
This attack comes after a lull in armed rebel activity in recent years. 2 days later, a statement by the OPM leader, Mathias Wenda, declared a revival of the West Papuan struggle. In what was reminiscent of the 70s and 80s, the statement names 10 regional commands stretching from Sorong at the tip of the Papua province to the border areas shared by Papua New Guinea. While much of the global community remains reserved or indifferent to the West Papuan concern, the OPM spokesperson who agreed to a recorded interview echoed long-held sentiments of independence, cultural identity, and a plea for the global community to pay attention to the Indonesian atrocities in West Papua.
Situation inside West Papua different. Day by day, people die. Indonesia museum kain way long kilimibla ino museum gan tasolo kilimul people.
But over the last 20 years, Indonesia has tried to move away from the image of the tough enforcer of its rule to one that is more diplomatic. The Indonesian consul in Vanimo, Jahar Gultom, says it's a difficult task to unite a country that is culturally diverse and complex as Papua New Guinea.
So we give special autonomy to some provinces like Papua, for instance, and Papua Barat, and also some other provinces like Aceh. We will not let that kind of, irregularities, that kind of threaten our border. Because our people in border, Indonesia and PNG, we need each other.
Mi pla ba non stop. This line first activity mi pla start him member continue.
They should be conducting the activities in Indonesian territory.
In recent years, Indonesian diplomacy has reached out to supporters of the West Papuan cause. Countries like Vanuatu and organizations like the Melanesian Spearhead Group have become more sympathetic towards Indonesia. The Indonesian government, meanwhile, maintains it's now more open to dialogue than ever before. But while diplomatic exchanges happen, building trust between those considered the aggressors and those afflicted over half a century remain the most daunting challenge. Scott Waide, National MTV News.
New Free West Papua campaign office in Perth, Australia. On the 27th of April, the West Papua campaign has opened a new office in Perth, Australia, which will work together with the other campaign offices in the United Kingdom, the Netherlands and Papua New Guinea. Also, the new office will be working with the international parliaments for West Papua, the international lawyers for West Papua and the global public to raise the voice of the West Papua people to the highest levels of the UN and to bring justice and peace to the West Papuan. This was all for April 2014. We wish you a safe May and hope to see you next time.
Tabea.
Tabea.